So in our meditation practice, the question comes up, what do we do with our thinking mind? How do we deal with the thoughts that arise? And it occurred to me that it might be useful to remember partly what the great Zen master Dogen said about thinking in relation to Zen meditation or Zazen. So he had a phrase, think non-thinking. So think about not thinking. Thinking about not thinking, to me, is an invitation to experience or to witness our actual experience of thinking itself. So it's not something we're used to doing. We're deeply conditioned to just going where our thoughts want us to go, paying attention to them as if they are some actual substance, some life force, independent life force, telling us the way things are and what we should be doing or not doing. So Dogen here is saying, pay attention to this actual experience of thinking itself rather than following the thinking or being pushed around by our thoughts. Many times in spiritual practice, we'll use the phrase, don't let your desires push you around. Well, desires are just manifestations of different things about different thoughts of how we think things are. And we sort of get pushed around by that, by the feelings that seem to arise from those thoughts. So here he's saying, just let the thinking process go where it wants to go. And there are stories of many Zen masters who have been dealing with this very problem. And are when they're with their masters, the master will tell them, just let your mind go where it wants to go. And it's usually a very long process of letting the mind settle down. But eventually, if we keep coming back to the actual experience of what thinking is, are our thoughts really going anywhere? Is there some substance actually there that can be a problem? What is the actual problem with our thinking? Isn't our thinking always already going wherever it wants to go? Sort of like the way our body breathes, our heart beats on their own, without us even noticing it. Much of the time, we're not even aware of the fact that our breathing is going on, or our heart is beating, or that our mind is thinking, all on its own. So thoughts arise on their own, and they dissolve on their own. I've talked quite a bit about a phrase from Kuang Roshi. Zen Master Kuang Roshi had a phrase, Zen, a breath sweeps mind. So if you think of our breath, the energy of our breath, the energy of our breath is the life force coursing through us all the time. It's what is producing our thoughts. It's what provides us with the opportunity to be aware of our thoughts, what provides us with the opportunity to witness and experience our actual experience of having thoughts. And it's also what dissolves the thoughts. Think of the life force as a sweeping motion, continually going through us. Or through the mystery, do we really know? Can we find that us, that me, that it's sweeping through, or is it just sweeping? Is there just a sweeping motion? Or think of a pendulum swinging, the pendulum of our experience, thoughts, feelings, sights and sounds, swinging as the pendulum swings. So when we're attached to our thoughts, most of our human experience is, we want to keep the pendulum at a high state, in a good state. In other words, we want it, if it's swinging between highs and lows, our negative emotions and our positive emotions, negative thoughts, positive thoughts, we tend to want to keep it in the high state, in the pleasant state. Things as we want them to be rather than things as they actually are. So if we let the mind go wherever it wants to go, that pendulum will start to swing more freely. And it'll go into negative thoughts, situations, we'll become aware of situations we don't like so much and we'd rather not go to. So there's that tendency to want to fixate on things the way we want them to be. Eventually we realize more and more, we realize inside, not just an intellectual realization, but a more full body, a more full-hearted realization that trying to keep that pendulum in a high state constricts our freedom of movement. So the process of allowing the mind to go where it wants to go, because actually it is always going where it wants to go. Allowing it to go where it wants to go, being aware of it going where it wants to go, frees up that pendulum, frees up the flow of our life energy, frees up that sweeping motion, that it can sweep freely through thoughts of negativity, through thoughts of joy and bliss. Because in that freedom, in that sweeping motion, if we stay with that itself, the awareness of being present here and now, we realize more deeply we realize more deeply we are what we actually are. More deeply, we can't find anything there that's a problem, other than just the process and the sweeping and arising of thoughts, the sweeping away of thoughts, the sweeping away and arising, or the arising and the sweeping away of all our experience. There's nothing there to be found that we need to be worried about, that we need to really be concerned about. This takes a long time, and we're all probably still in the process of it. I know I am. I recently got a diagnosis that the leaking in my heart valve, the aortic valve, is the biggest valve in our body. And the leaking that I've been aware of for the last 10 years or so has reached the point where it's severe. They did an MRI, and like 56% of the blood pumping out of the heart is actually leaking back into my heart. When you have a leaky heart valve, the blood actually leaks back into the heart. And so there's not as much blood getting to other parts of the body, plus there's a gradual buildup of pressure within the heart. So I'm getting a mortality reminder that this body is impermanent. This life force is not going to be circulating through this idea of a body, a physical body, forever. And fortunately, there's some non-invasive. There's a new non-invasive procedure where they just stick a catheter and they don't have to crack your ribs open and stop your heart in order to replace that aortic valve. So I'm going to be seeing a surgeon about that. So it's interesting, all this talk I put out about thinking and non-thinking and the life force and birth and death, and now it's hitting home. So there's a deeper awareness, and I don't feel real anxious about it. I feel kind of reassured that maybe the next step is coming, and who knows? Who knows? But the freedom to more fully feel that anxiety about birth and death in itself is peaceful, is reassuring. It feels authentic because it's what I'm really feeling. There's a fullness, even in the anxiety, there's a fullness, a sense of fullness that comes through. And I can't really explain that in words so much. But there's a feeling of compassion, knowing that, this body's dying. The personality as I know it is slowly dying, and that we're all dying together. But to feel the freedom of more fully being present in all of experience, in the depth of all of experience, feels like a big step on the path to self-realization of what we actually are. There's a poem by Ryokan that sometimes when I wake up in the middle of the night, I'll remember. And he's talking about laying on his bed in his, hut way out in the middle of nowhere. This is 18th century Japan. And it's in the middle of the night. And he talks about observing the stream peacefully flowing by in the moonlight, softly reflecting off the water. Nothing but the sound of a soft breeze. A peaceful soft breeze and the occasional peaceful cry of a bird. In observing this scene, boundless, endless emotion, but not one word, not one thought.